looking to start your property investment journey and you're not sure what is the best strategy to make you money, and you're not sure whether you can buy the property and rent it to a family or maybe use it as serviced accommodation, I'm going to walk through the definitions of each, the calculations, but also the advantages and disadvantages so that it can give a defined sort of idea of what returns and what are the advantages you can get from this property. Hey guys, it's Rahim. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, smash the subscribe button because I talk about property investment, personal development, and how to gain financial freedom. If you're not going to invest 30 minutes of your time to watch this video to learn how to manage and multiply income through investment properties, I'm afraid you're not going to make it. You see, when you start your property investment journey, you really want to get into strategies that gives you serious return on your investment, but also gives you an income that will get you to financial freedom as quickly as you could possibly can. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. So let's start with family let. What is family let? Some people call it family rental property. It is a process by which you, the investor, would buy a property, usually 2, 3, or 4 bedroom, and rent it out to a professional family for a monthly recurring income. So it's a steady sort of income that you know you get every single month because you've got a family there, and the family also tend to stay very, very long time in those properties. So you kind of been assured to make that rental income every single month. Now, let's look at serviced accommodation. What is serviced accommodation? Some people call serviced accommodation as Airbnb properties because these are the most common words used for properties that have been rented that way. So it is the process by which an investor would buy a property, again 2 or 3 bedroom houses or apartment. Instead of renting it to a family, they rent it per night to individuals, event goers, contractors. So they use the property as a mini boutique type hotel without having on-site staff. So in essence, they set the property as a hotel, everything will be in the property, so they rent it per night to people that are interested in staying in these properties in a short-term basis. So these are the 2 definitions of each of these strategies. So let's now move on to the income each strategy generates. Let's get to the calculations to see which investment strategies generate us a bit more money. Now, let's look at family let. Let's assume this property is a 3-bedroom house and it is in Birmingham. Looking at Birmingham, the average rental income for a 3-bedroom house is about £1,200. So let's go for £1,200. So if you buy a 3-bedroom house in Birmingham, you're likely to make £1,200 every single month. So this is the money your tenant would pay you for living in your investment property. So estimated interest payment is likely to be £500 looking at the value of the property. And then if an agency is managing that property for you, the agency normally charges you 10% of your gross rental income. That will be £120. So obviously, because it's a rental property, you are obliged to have insurance for that property. And the type of insurance I'm talking about here is building insurance. I'm not talking about content, just building insurance, basic insurance to protect your investment, to ensure that if anything goes wrong, you are covered. So that is usually about £50. So obviously, because it's a rental property, you've got people living in the property. So you may expect to have some repair and maintenance. Let's just factor in about £100 for our repair and maintenance. So let's look at expenses. Obviously, we know we have an interest payment to pay for our property, which is £500. We have the management fees that we also pay to the estate agency for managing our property. And also we have our insurance, our building insurance. Obviously, we're putting aside £100 every single month to ensure that if anything goes wrong, we have money saved to actually look after the repairs. So if you add all those figures up together, that gives us a total expense of £770. So if we take £770 from our gross rental income, that would give us a net profit of £430. So in essence, this 3-bedroom house here generates you £430 every single month without you doing anything, basically. So it's about renting the property, getting all the expenses out, and then it makes you £430 every single month. It's a very, very good return on investment, especially 75% of the value of that property is actually money that the bank themselves put down. And obviously you've got your tenant here paying you rental income every single month. With that, then you're able to deduct all the expenses, making about £430. That is what we call passive monthly recurring income. So if we times that by 12, you're talking about £5,160 from one rental properties. And again, looking at the figures, looking at the average rental income within the UK, it is a very, very good return on your investment, because obviously it's making good money, right? You're making about £430. So it's a very good investment. So if you're one of those investors that like to have this sort of income, it is beautiful. I love this sort of income, because obviously I know then once the tenants are in, you're all sorted and you're making £5,160. So it's a very good income. Okay, I'm not saying it's not good. It is beautiful. Most investors are happy with making this sort of income. But then let's just flip the chart now. Let's look at serviced accommodation. Some people call it Airbnb. Same property, same location, same every single thing. Looking at the Birmingham area, properties like this are going for £150 per night. That £150 is what the guest would pay you before they even check into your property. So let's say then we times that by 30 nights, that will give us £4,500. I know what you're thinking about right now, thinking, whoa, how can I let the property for 30 nights every single month for £4,500? I know it does not usually work like that, unless if you really one of those that are very lucky to kind of get contractors or event goers or maybe consultants that will book your property for kind of 2 or 3 months. That normally happens as well, but don't worry about it. I'm going to talk about how you could also get people like that in your property. But what I like to look at when I'm looking at serviced accommodation is 2 things. Oh, sorry for interrupting this video. I just wanted to draw your attention to a guide I've just created. This guide is for you if you're looking to start and scale in property investment, and you've got questions that you want to ask in order to start your property investment. This guide is the ultimate guide to start and scale in property investment journey. I talk about the different type of investment strategies. I also discuss the 11 ways you can raise finance to make any property no money down deals, and the type of properties to buy in order to generate a serious return in your investment. And I'm giving this book away for completely free of charge, no string attached, nothing, absolutely free. Click the link on the description of this video to get your free guide now. We've only got a limited number of these copies available as well, so click the link to get your guide now. Let's get back to our video. The first thing I do, I look at it in a yearly basis, because I want to know what my average income is going to be, but also I also look at the worst case scenarios, meaning if I do not rent my property 100% of the time, what would be my average income? So what I normally do, that figure, then I will times that figure by 50%, meaning I'm saying here, if I rent my property for only 50 nights a month, how much money am I likely to make, knowing that the guest pays you before he checks in your property? So 50% of that amount would be £2,250. So that then becomes our rental income, £2,250. This then becomes our gross rental income as a serviced accommodation. So obviously the mortgage interest payment would be exactly the same amount. Why? Because we're comparing it with the same property, so the interest would be exactly the same. So if you look at that, then the interest would be £500. Running an Airbnb property involves some cost. This you're talking about setup costs, cleaning costs, fees, management, tidying up the property, getting the cleaner to come around and clean it nicely to make the property ready for the next guest. So obviously it would be a bit more expensive than actually a family-led property, because when you're doing a family-led property, you're not worried about your bills, you're not worried about cleaning, you're not worried about any of that, because the tenant lives in the property. It is their responsibility to actually look after the property. But when it comes to serviced accommodation, all the costs around that property, it's your responsibility, you the investor, yourself, the electricity, the gas, anything that goes around that property, it's your responsibility. So because then obviously you take that responsibility, we're gonna factor £750 as your cost. That will be your running cost, the cost you incur to make the property ready for the next guest. Okay, so if you add those two costs together here, you're talking about 1,250. So as you can see then, your monthly cost here versus looking at your monthly cost as a family-let property, there is a significant difference between those two amounts, because as a family-let is 720, but then as a serviced accommodation property, you're talking about £1,250. That then becomes your monthly expenses. So if you minus your £1,200 from your 2,250, that gives you a net profit of £1,000. So in essence, every single month, you're most likely to be able to generate £1,000 every month in average. So knowing that, then you then times that figure by 12. If you times that 1,000 by 12, you're talking about £12,000 a year. So now, what is this £12,000? This £12,000 is your net profit. This is the profit you make for running the property as a serviced accommodation instead of renting it to a family let. So as you can see here, with a family let, we are generating £5,160. So if you do it as Airbnb, we're making, at 50% occupancy rate, we're making £12,000. So as you can see here, we're making almost more than double the net profit as a serviced accommodation than if we were to rent it to a family. So now you may be thinking, this is crazy. Why is not everybody doing this? This then gets me to talk about the advantages and disadvantages for each of these investment strategies. So we now know serviced accommodation makes you more money. Let's look at worst case scenario for the Airbnb property. I'd like to look at my investment analysis on a worst case scenario basis. We now know we're making £12,000 every single year by renting the property as a serviced accommodation for only 15 nights per month. So let's get it a little bit on a worst case scenario again. Let's say then we were not able to rent this property out, right, for 15 nights per month. Let's say we only rented 50% of that 15 nights as well. Let's say we just rented about 8 days a month, right? So if you were to do that, 50% of that amount, then 50% of that £12,000, that would be £6,000. So we now know, even at about, say, 25% occupancy rate, we're still making money as a serviced accommodation more than the family let property. So you can see, even if you rent that property for only 8 to 10 nights a month, you're still making £6,000 versus renting that property as a family let. So you can see that no matter how kind of you go worse on your service accommodation, you still it's likely to make you more money than the family let property. So let's look at the pros and cons of doing that. So when it comes to family let, it's a very easy, simple investment strategy. You buy the property, you set it up nicely, you don't need to buy furniture, you don't need to buy white goods, you don't need to buy anything to set the property. All you need to do is to have a kitchen and a cooker in there, and then you rent the property out. So once you rent it, then obviously your tenant pays you rent every single month. So not a lot to do in that sense. But also with serviced accommodation, once your tenant moved in your property, hopefully you know what you're doing, and then you got the right tenant in the property. So you then know that rental income here, that £430 a month, is guaranteed to you every single month. Regardless what happened, that tenant pays you your rent every single month, no question asked. So you've got that steady, recurring income without having to worry about anything. But another advantage also is that you don't have to worry about cleaning, you don't have to worry about paying the bills, you don't have to worry about whether a guest is going to damage your property or whether they're going to turn up in the first place. Perhaps you don't even need to worry about fluctuation as well, and you don't need to worry about ensuring the property is all nice and tidy. Obviously you got your customer services, you got all this stuff that goes, you have to worry about all that. This property then gives you that leverage not to do anything apart from literally handing the property to an agent, and then that agent then contacts you every single month, pay you your rental income, and you make that steady income. So this sort of strategy is a good strategy, because this is how I started. I use this strategy because obviously it's a steady recurring income, but also it is a kind of guaranteed income every single month, and you don't have to worry about anything. So this sort of strategy may be suitable for busy working professional. So what is the disadvantage then for renting a property as a family let? So one of the first disadvantages is that if you don't get the right tenant in the property, they've moved in, they pay you rent 1 month, and then all the remaining month they don't pay you the rent, and then it becomes a bit of an issue to kind of get them to leave your property, especially now the government is kind of putting so many laws around that to give the landlords bare minimum power to evict a tenant from their investment property. And now, especially if you're in Wales, that takes you about 6 months to evict someone from your property. So it's kind of a bit of a hard thing to do to get someone out of your property. And obviously the law is also favored to the tenant a lot more than the landlords themselves. And the other disadvantage is that when something goes wrong, especially if the tenant is not paying you rent every single month, they don't tend to report the problem. They wait until it becomes really, really bad before they inform you that there's something gone wrong with your investment property. So obviously if your tenant is not paying you, it impacts your interest here as well, because obviously you're depending on the tenant rental income to be able to pay your interest of your mortgage. So obviously any problems here affect you here as well. Okay, so these are the sort of disadvantages. You've got your tenant right issues, you've got tenant not paying you rent and going through a legal process to kind of evict them. It takes about 6 months or so, and the government's about to change that in England as well to go for like 6 months. But as I said, if you reference the tenant really nice and you ensure that they are the suitable people for your property, you won't have any of this problem. But the advantage then, then you've got your monthly recurring income every single time. I hope that helps, right? I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do. You could do this as well, right? You can do it. It's a great investment strategy. I love it. I still have lots of properties that I actually have as a rental property. Okay, so now let's look at serviced accommodation. When it comes to serviced accommodation, it is like a business. Let's talk about the disadvantage first. It is like a business. So obviously you've got your customer services. You need to make sure when your guests are checking in, they're checking in nicely, no problem, sending them the instructions. And if there's any issue, ensuring you have someone standby to go and fix the issue, and also making sure the property is really clean and tidy before your guests check in. But also when it comes to serviced accommodation, you have fluctuations. Sometimes you get loads of bookings, sometimes you get mid-range bookings, sometimes you get no bookings. So basically it fluctuates. Right, it fluctuates. So if you're one of those that are thinking, oh, I don't want to deal with fluctuation, perhaps you want to revert to family let investment properties, because then the rental income is steady income, especially if you've done the referencing really nice, which I believe if you're watching this video now, you now know that is a very important factor for you to take in. So you've got the fluctuation there, and then obviously it is a hospitality business. You've got to be in it to win it. We also have guest damages. So the guest may pop into your property, do party, and then they just kind of damage it, and then sometimes it's very costly to fix. But if you know what you're doing, you can avoid all that without actually having problems with that anymore. But let's look at the advantages. The first advantage is your guest pays you before they check in your property. So if they booked you in to check into your property tomorrow, they pay that money before they check into your property. In essence, you get paid before they utilize the property. That's a massive advantage. But also because they're paying you in a nightly basis, they're paying you more money than the rental income you'd have received as a landlord renting the property to a family. As we can see in this example here, it's £150 per night. So they pay that £150 per night before they check into your property. It's a very reassuring knowing that you're not going to have problems getting your money. And then obviously you have ways that you also manipulate to get more money. Suppose you got a 3-bedroom house that you can say sleep minimum of 3 people, but sleep about maybe 6 or 7 people. Any additional guest, you can charge extra money as well. You can charge 40, 50 or 60 pounds per additional guest. So meaning you may have a base rate of £150 here, okay, but if you're charging £50 for any additional guest, if you have, let's say, 3 more guests there, so you've got 6 guests, so you're talking about £300 per night. Okay, so you can charge any additional guest, meaning you're making more money that way. So that is a very, very good way to think about it. Another way you could also make a bit more money from the investment property is that you can charge for early check-in and late checkout as well. And then maybe if they have pets, they want to bring their pets, you can also charge for pets. So there's so many ways you can actually increase that nightly rate. Okay, it could go up to like £300 or £400, sometimes even £500 if you know how to structure it nicely. And obviously, if you are renting the property during summertime, or maybe you're renting it when there's an event going, you charge also higher nightly rate as well, because obviously at that time your property is in high demand. Another advantage is there's no tenant rights. So suppose your guests check into your property and you don't want them to stay there, maybe you suspect they are not the right sort of guest in your property, you can literally ring them up, ask them to leave your property. There's no tenancy right. They're not going to say, you can evict your notice. No, you can go ask them to leave. If they don't, you can actually call the police and the police will kick them out for you. So suppose then they're meant to check out at 10 o'clock and they did not check out, you can literally send your cleaner around, your cleaner will chuck them out, set your property out for the next guest as well. So you have that control. So nobody have the right to stay in your property. But here's the kind of a massive advantage. You know, when something goes wrong in your property, if you're renting it, sometimes you don't get to hear it quickly. But when it comes to serviced accommodation, literally as soon as your guest checks out, your cleaner comes in, she will see the problem straight away, right? 2 advantages there. The first advantage, if the damage is caused or if the repair is due to the guest messing about with something or maybe damage something in the property, you're already protected for that as well. We've got something that we call damage deposit. So meaning then if that property is damaged, if your house is damaged, guess what? The guest would pay for the damage, and you can deduct that from the damage deposit as well. You don't have to go through this lengthy process of doing it. It's literally a click of a button. You can click a button, you can claim that damage deposit, and you go in and sort your property out without actually having to get the money yourself to go and fix the repairs. The second advantage of that also, when things goes wrong, suppose it is something to do with just a malfunction of the property, you know instantly what the problem is. You can go and fix it when it's a tiny little problem, instead of it becoming a massive problem that will just cause the property to deteriorate. So that's another massive advantage. You know when the problem is. The other serious advantage is that your house becomes a show home. In essence, your house is used less than when you rent it, because the house is only used when you've got a guest in the property. So in essence, you have a show home basically. So you can actually visit the property at any time. You can stay there. You can use it as a holiday home. You can literally get family, friends to visit the property. You don't have to actually seek a notice or let the tenants know you're going to move in there. Because it is not tenanted, you don't actually have to give tenants notices to visit the property. It is a very beautiful way to think about it. But for some of you that thinking, whoa, this is like a business, I hear you. If you systemize this, all the stuff I've talked about here, you can systemize every single thing. Working with my investors, what we do once we set a property up, the first thing we got to do is to systemize the whole process. We made sure everything is systemized along the way every single time, so it runs without you. So in average, invest about an hour or an hour 30 minutes every week to manage your serviced accommodation property. But here's the thing, would you not spend an hour or an hour 30 minutes to make £1,000 a month? I would do that whole day long, because obviously everything's on your phone. It's not like you have to physically visit the property. It's not like you got to carry stuff to go and sort it out. No, the amount of hours you spend to do it is about making sure the guests have checked in properly, making sure the cleaner has gone in to clean the property, making sure if there's any issue, you've got your maintenance team to go and sort it out. That's it. That's it basically. That's the things that you could do. But again, if you systemize it, if you leave your numbers in the property, if this goes wrong, call this number. If that goes wrong, call these numbers. So all that problems literally is taken away from you, and then you've got your people to get that done as well. But here's the massive advantage of doing a serviced accommodation is the rental income. Is the net profit that you make. Imagine then having £12,000 every single year from the same sort of investment. So I call it cash machine. The reason why I call it cash machine is basically the amount of time you've put in versus the income that you make is just ridiculous, right? It's just ridiculous. Literally, you make more money in this sort of strategy than you are renting it as a family. You can see here, even at worst case scenario, renting it 25% of a year, you're talking about 3.5 months here or so, right? You still make more money than if you're to rent it to a family let. And with family let, it brings all these problems, tenant issues, not paying your rent every month, making excuses, my cat has died, this had happened. You don't get that when it comes to service accommodation because they pay you before they get into the property. So obviously, making £12,000 in one investment property, it's an amazing return on investment. Not talking about all these additional guests you'll be getting, charging for early check-in, late check-out, charging for cats, children, and all that sort of thing. Basically, that then boosts your income from maybe 12,000 to about 16 to 20,000 pounds. So if you really want your money to work a lot harder for you, and if you're one of those that like fluctuation, it doesn't matter as long as you're making more money end of the year than renting it. If you're one of those that is happy to get your income that way, serviced accommodation will be the best investment strategy for you, and it is one of the quickest way to get you to financial freedom. So imagine then you've got 3 of this serviced accommodation property. How much are you talking about that? You're talking about £36,000 a year, and that is way more than the average salary in the UK. So here's the thing, I'm not saying don't do family let. If you're one of those, family let is beautiful. As I said, I've got family let investment properties. But if you really want to expedite your property investment journey and you want to become a property person, literally you want to be a property investor so that you can quit your job the quickest way you could possibly can, maybe going the service accommodation route would be the best for you, because that Airbnb route obviously gets a bit busier, but also it substitutes your income quickly so you can get into property and do so many stuff a lot more, but also give you more time to spend with your loved ones, because you can manage the property whilst you're away on holiday, whilst you are out with your kids. So literally it requires you minimum amount of input, and it's the fastest way to grow your property portfolio as well. And with service accommodation also, once you know the formula, right, you can even get over landlord's property and you use the landlord's properties as serviced accommodation as well. But when it comes to family let, you've got to buy the property in order for you to be able to rent it as a family. If you're thinking about investing in properties, you're not sure which strategy to go ahead with, or perhaps you already started your investment journey, you want to try Airbnb, but you're not sure whether it was the investment strategy for you, I hope this short video has kind of given you an idea of what your returns are, what your advantages and disadvantages are, but also give you the definition and the overview of each investment strategy. If you want to learn how to implement any of these strategies and you think one of these will really get you to where you want to go, click the link in the description below to learn how we may be able to help you. If you like this video or any of my videos, smash the like button below, subscribe to my channel for more amazing videos. I look forward to sharing the next one.